Welcome to the podcast, Michelle. It's an honor to have you here. I'm excited to learn more about you and your story. You have a fantastic podcast yourself. So I'm sure that this whole process is nothing new to you, but your podcast is called In Total Alignment. But we're going to learn more about your backstory and really how you got to where you are today and teaching the things that you did. And I know you did a huge pivot there that will that you'll explain for the listeners, but tell us a little bit about your backstory and why you even started your podcast and how you got to teaching what you're doing today.
Oh, well, first of all, I just want to say thanks for having me here on your podcast. We had such a great conversation a couple weeks ago on my show, and you gave so much value. So I just hope that I can even give half as much value here today. Gosh, my story, it is so random and so crazy and sometimes hard to believe even when I speak it out loud. But 25 years ago, I was in the middle of a really successful Aveda salon and spa, had 12 staff members, truthfully thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I was a hairstylist, and as far as I could tell, as much as I asked myself any questions, I was happy doing it and fulfilled, and sort of thought I would have multiple spas around the province is really what I kind of thought. And throughout my whole teenage 20s and early to mid 30s, I always struggled so desperately with my weight. I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was around 17 or 18. But just to give you context, I'm 49. So when I was 17, nothing was being done about this. When I can still remember the day that this specialist told me that I had PCOS, and he literally said, "You'll be overweight for the rest of your life, and you most likely won't be able to have kids." And I can remember being by myself. I don't know where my mom was. I always say, why weren't you at that appointment with me? She has no clue. I'm sure because we didn't really think that's what they were going to tell me. And I remember driving directly to my dad's office and telling him this, and him just sitting there shocked. Of course, this shocking statement, you'll probably never be a grandpa. And honestly, that was it. There was no help. There was no direction, nothing. That was really it. I saw an endocrinologist once a year because I also had a tumor on my pituitary gland, a prolactinoma. So I was more specifically seeing the endocrinologist for that. And they were just making sure that that tumor was kept at bay, but never really teaching me that I could make any changes with my nutrition. That was never mentioned. It was just kind of like this death sentence, or not death sentence, but this sentence that I had kind of hanging over my head. Somewhere along the line, I was nuts to this. I just was so tired of feeling so heavy, and being heavy made me really, really insecure. There's some people that are heavy but have confidence, and honestly, I envy them because I think it's cool to watch them still work the room and look gorgeous, and they just have this air about them. That was not me. I hid under jackets, under pants. I just was so insecure. So finally, my late 20s, early 30s, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I just started self-researching. I started digging in. The first thing I did was, internet was early then. So I would be searching everything online and started learning about nutrition, just balanced nutrition. I got into some at-home workout programs that I still do to this day. So I just kind of started my health and wellness journey. And really, over a period of about 10 years, I finally got about 80 pounds off. So I know that's not a really awesome success story because it feels like that's a long time. But for me, it was great because it was just little chunks at a time. I literally am the picture of take one habit and perfect it, and then take another habit and layer it on, and then take another. And literally over 10 years, I can see the trajectory of where that happened that landed me here. And I've been able to sustain that weight loss. I've never gone back. So it is a success story. It wasn't quick, but it was sustainable. And somewhere along the line, I just was addicted to helping women do the same. I talked to so many women in my salon and spa, and that's what we talked about. Really, ultimately, every conversation ended up talking about weight, confidence, healthy eating. So in 2014, I made a pivot. I crazy, wild, literally started helping women with their health and wellness and just fell in love with it. And within 2 years, I was able to close my salon and spa. And I've been doing this full time ever since. And last year I went back to school to get my certification for Nutritional Therapy Practitioner, which that was wild because that was never on my radar, but I just continue to learn. I just absolutely love learning about how we can prolong our life, how we can have longevity. I mean, for me at 49, it's no longer about what the number on the scale says. I could care less. It's not about fitting into trendy skinny jeans or wearing a bikini, to be honest. Like, there was a time that was important to me. And if that's important to you, like, that's fine. But for me, I watched my dad pass away of lung cancer 6 years ago. I've watched so many people in my family just have so many challenges, and I don't want to be like that. I just want to be able to thrive into my 80s and 90s and beyond. I said to my husband actually yesterday, we were talking about his dad who's in his late 80s, and it feels like every day they're going to another appointment at the doctor. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want my life to look like that. Like, I want to feel as good as I feel today when I'm 89. Maybe it's a little bit slower, but I really want to do whatever I can right now to make sure that however many years I have left, they are spent with energy, with vitality, and hopefully disease-free. Watching a parent die of cancer makes you really scared of cancer. I know there's lots of other diseases, but because that's the one closest to me, I really take every opportunity I can to hopefully make sure that doesn't happen. So that's like the long version
I love
of my
it.
story.
I mean, talk about a success story. You're kind of like, well, I don't know that that's a success story. I mean, 80 pounds down, you kind of change your whole life. Your whole mindset is different. You are teaching your children a completely different way of what you grew up with. And I can't imagine, don't you just want to go to your 18, 19-year-old self and just give her a hug and say, so my daughter was diagnosed with PCOS when she was 18. And so I just can't imagine her being told, you're not going to have kids and you're going to be overweight. Like, how devastating for a female teenage. Those are like the two worst things you could tell somebody and give them no direction whatsoever. So the really sad part is, I don't know that it's changed a whole lot in the last 30 years. So you got no direction. There's definitely more data. There's more out there. You can go on Instagram, you can find, PCOS specialists. There's so much information, but it's hard to sort through like what is actually helpful and what is just kind of leading you down a path of maybe not making the biggest difference for you. But I feel like the tides are finally turning, but sometimes I sit, like I live and breathe metabolic health all day, every day, kind of like you. It's like, I listen to podcasts about it. I'm always learning. I'm keeping up on, all of the more recent data and the studies and following specialists and scientists. So I live and breathe it. So I think, oh yeah, we're making some headway. But then it's like you hear stories and people, like I just got an email this morning about this woman who I know who's had like severe highs and lows on her blood sugar. And she was sending me her continuous glucose monitor graph. And it was, I'm like, Oh my gosh, you must feel like crap all the time because it's
Yeah.
like spike low, spike low. I mean, it's reactive hypoglycemia textbook. I'm like, you must feel like crap all the time. They're like, yeah, my doctor said I don't need any additional workup and to just eat a snack before I go to bed. I'm like, oh goodness, like this is so crazy. So I know I try to walk before I start my day most days and pray. And I just like, I'm praying for so many family members and so many family members who are ill, who are just going down that path of metabolic disease. And it's frightening. It's sad. My mom is battling cancer right now. So I get you. It's like, I'm 48. Well, no, I'm almost 48. I'm still 47. Sometimes I always forget how old I am, but it's like we're the same age and kind of in the same walk of life. And yeah, I mean, your story could be really tragic, but it's not. So tell us more about that pivot. And I'm sure people are like, oh my gosh, she lost 80 pounds. And like you said, it's not all about the weight. And when it comes in increments like that, it's really about resolving metabolic health and just getting your body a little bit healthier, like working on little by little resolving whatever it is that's making your body ill. So give us some snippets of, how you went about doing that, because that is a huge feat. And it's good that it took 10 years. It's like that's the sustainable weight loss, and that doesn't come back. It's like you lose 80 pounds in 6 months. You gotta wonder.
Oh, yeah.
So
Exactly.
tell us the little snippets that you did to get to have that success.
So the first thing that I did, the first two habits were I started walking because the thought of work. So never was I going to go to a gym. I mean, when I think about myself 20 years ago and now, this girl 20 years ago would never have been on a podcast. Like
Yeah.
I was shy and insecure, felt ugly, like all those classic things that aren't true to people on the outside. But when I looked in the mirror, that's what I saw. I just saw this like overweight embarrassment to people. I felt like I was an embarrassment to my parents, that I was pretty successful in other areas of my life. I had a really successful business, but I just couldn't get this weight under control. And I felt like it was my fault. I mean, who can relate to that? You're blaming willpower. You're just like, I'm such a loser. I just can't stop eating chips. Like, I really believed that. So the first thing that I decided to do was water and walk. So every morning I was a morning person naturally because my dad always woke up at 4:30 in the morning. So our house was just awake. So getting up early in the morning before work and walking was one habit, probably the first habit that I created. And you guys, if you're going from really, really heavy, that one habit can make a big change. So that helped me lose, 10, 15 pounds in that first probably 6 or 7 months. Once you get that motivation, that ammunition, like, oh, people start noticing, I started feeling better. Then the next change I made was really leaning into my nutrition. Now, I am not going to tell you that the things I did back 10 years ago are the things that I would suggest for people now. Because back then we did a lot of restricting, we did dieting. Like, I'm so glad everything is changing now, that people are understanding how damaging this restriction was. I did everything, Weight Watchers, like I did all of those things. Yes, they helped me lose 10 pounds here, 10 pounds here. But I definitely walked through that restrict binge. I know we're going to talk about fasting. And the first time I tried fasting, I did it really, really bad. I was really just fasting to eat less. Like I was just using it as this crutch to eat less and then think that that was my green card to eat junk food. So I did it all wrong and blamed fasting, of course. Like fasting didn't work because I wasn't working it properly. So that was the first time I tried fasting, but I tried everything. Like I was just trying everything to get this weight off, but it was all just little things. I can remember getting 10 pounds off and then just staying there for the rest of the year. And then kind of getting, and I don't mean like January 1st, I just mean I would get another little blip of motivation. Okay, what's the next step going to be? And I got into lifting more weights, and I started to understand how strength training. And then the next thing was like, okay, I need to prioritize protein. And then quite recently, 2.5, almost 3 years ago, I started intermittent fasting again, but the right way, and using that as a tool to really get my blood sugar under control, because I had some panels done and my blood sugar was still quite out of control, which I remember you saying this on my podcast. Like, I can't imagine if they would have taken panels like years ago, like when I was 18. I can't even imagine. They would have said you should be dead, because I was just doing everything so poorly back then that even 3 years ago I had done a lot to auto correct. But those panels came back showing, definitely I needed to work on my blood sugar, and my adrenals were kind of I was just kind of a hot mess, to be honest. So I've spent the last 2.5 years just really balancing my body, like just coming back to homeostasis, like just like calming everything, really working on stress management. One of the biggest hurdles for me was bringing back my fasting, actually. I love fasting. And I mean, when I think of autophagy and all these amazing things that it's doing for our bodies, it killed me to also understand the piece. You can't overdo it right now. Like your adrenals, your thyroid, everything is so shot. You just really need to like take care. And I'm finally kind of walking through that now. And I'm excited to be able to kind of go back into some of those practices that I want to do with fasting for the healing benefits, for the longevity. Because as I said, it's really important to me.
Yeah. And it must just be women in our age bracket too, because I had adrenal testing done about 1.5 years ago. Oh, yeah. It's just coming up on a year.
Yeah.
And yeah, like my cortisol is basically flatlined in the morning, which is worse than it kind of being up and down. That flat line is like, oh yeah, you've really tanked your adrenals. So I kind of took the same approach. I know I must be in perimenopause, so I don't want to go into menopause with tanked adrenals, because the adrenals have to take on the work of producing the hormones that the ovaries say, I'm done. And so if your adrenals aren't working optimally, you have a tougher time going through menopause. So I get you. Like, I've really had to slow my pace in the last couple of years. Like I've backed off of real high intensity exercise. I've backed off of my distance running that I used to do. And, my kids are older, so that makes it a little bit easier in a lot of ways. I wouldn't say always, but just to back off, slow down, say, okay, like you don't always have to get everything on your checklist and your to-do list done. If you don't get a post out on Instagram today, the world's not going to end. People aren't going to be messaging me, why didn't you post today? It's just like, it's just taking a step. Like, that is maturity, and wisdom is just, okay, I know what I need. Like, I know in my head what I should be doing, but I can't overdo it. So talk a little bit more about the fasting and like how your approach changed and how you used it to be more therapeutic versus, like you said, restrictive and more of a calorie deficit. Because I know a lot of women come to fasting for weight loss purposes. That's the main reason why they're trying fasting. It's not so much looking at it as a therapy, like this is going to heal my body. It's, oh, well, if I'm only eating 4 or 6 hours out of the day, then I'm not going to be eating as much. But yet then maybe they binge when they are eating, and it's just kind of backfiring on them, and if they're not doing it to work with their hormones, can be working against their hormones. So yeah, tell us how that changed for you.
Well, luckily, I just appreciate, people like you and, Dr. Mindy Pels and Cynthia just giving so much information, because 2.5 years ago, I wasn't in nutritional therapy school. I was just like a random woman on Instagram looking around for all of these, reading all the books about fasting. And I believe it was Dr. Mindy who started talking about fasting with your cycle. And that really resonated with me. I was like, one of my really good friends is a cycle syncing expert. So I always kind of heard about cycle syncing through her, didn't really get that into it, to be honest. She was more kind of the energetics of cycle syncing. So I found it interesting, but kind of just let it go. But when Dr. Mindy started talking about it, I'm like, okay, this makes sense. I know because I've heard there's these phases in our cycle. And if I think about it, I can understand. I do feel, less energetic right before my cycle is going to start. I do feel more creative in this section. So it kind of made a lot of sense to me that we should fast with our cycle. So I started implementing that right away. And I kind of loved it. I could understand that it made sense not to do the same thing every single day. I was understanding that we don't want to eat the same foods every single day because we need different vitamins and nutrients, eat the rainbow, make sure that you're getting things changed up. So it made sense to me that you shouldn't be just doing 18-6 every single day of your life, especially when you have hormones and they're fluctuating all different times of the month. So this really started making sense. So I started doing that. So the first kind of 10 days of my cycle is when, if I feel like I'm healthy enough to do a long fast, that's when I do them. So day 1 to 10, I might throw in a 20-hour fast because I believe in autophagy. Like, I believe that when you get there, you really are doing something so beautiful for your body. So in those first 10 days, that's when I would throw those in. And then really for me, I keep it fairly simple that the last half of my cycle, I'm just really, the last half, when we know our body's trying the hardest it can to build some progesterone, I really don't go past 13, 14 hours. I'm a big believer. I heard a doctor say this on a podcast. I wish I could remember. It was years ago, but he said, if everyone would just rest from food for 12 hours, if everyone would just do that, don't even worry about doing anything else, but just do that, half the diseases in America would be gone away. And I just constantly remember that. And I really have become more aware of my body. So this morning was a really good example. Today, I could have done a longer fast, and I actually thought about it. Like I planned that I was going to, but at 8 o'clock, I really did feel hunger cues. Like I was hungry. So I no longer allow myself to force myself to not eat. I was, and I knew all I needed is something little. It was going to be before my workout. And my gut always tells me I should eat before I work out. I know that if we're not eating before we work out, we're going to spike that cortisol. And I'm really, really cautious and about my cortisol levels because I've done so much work to try and heal everything that I don't want to go backwards. So I've really become good at listening to the cues of my body. So this morning, I had a little snack because I was going to go work out. So I didn't beat myself up about, oh, well, you were going to do a longer fast today. Well, that's okay. I'll probably do it tomorrow. What probably happened is I didn't eat enough at supper last night. I didn't eat enough to sustain me. So that's a good lesson. So tonight I'll know better. I will eat maybe a little bit more protein or something to make sure that I can get through. So I can have that longer fast because I do believe that I want a couple autophagy fasts in that first part of my cycle.
Yeah. And I've been starting to teach more of my students, especially when they have high insulin. It's like they want to jump in and do 16 to 18 hours of fasting right away. It's like, no. And I've always been like, let's pull out snacks first and really just focus on eating meals and getting those rounded out and focusing on protein and natural fats. But I just feel like more and more students are starting to do a lot better with the earlier eating window. And if we want to call it an eating window, whenever it is that you're breaking your fast and fasting through dinner, and doing it more in the circadian rhythm way, people are seem to be doing really well with that. And I know I pulled back. Like today, we started our podcast recording time at 11. Old me would have been like, I'm going to push through and wait until after, I want my brain sharp. I want to be in a fasted state when I'm recording. But today I was like, no, like I'm in the second half of my cycle. And I'm really hungry. And I walked this morning and, pretty long walk, and I'm going to eat before. And then I'll just have an earlier, like late afternoon, early evening meal. And, you just, once you can wrap your head around, like, that's okay. You don't have to wait until at least noon every single day, but you're absolutely right. Like that was 12 hours of gut rest, basically, is how you want to look at it, like resting your gut for at least 12 hours. If you do that with no snacks, you're going to be a more metabolically healthy than 90% of the people.
I know. And people feel so much better. Like once I get my clients, I'm like, because a lot of people resist fasting, and that's okay. But I'm like, okay, we're not even going to call it fasting. We're just resting from food. Like if you think about it logically, if you ran your car 18 out of 24 hours, how fast would it break down? Like it can't run 24 hours a day. And that's actually what you're doing to your insides. Like if they're constantly digesting food, how can they do any of the other jobs? Like there's so many more things our body needs to do for us. And at night, that's when it gets a chance to do it. We're resting. So let it rest. And if anyone here struggles with late night snacking, I will tell you, 4 years ago, if you would have told me I would not bring up a bowl of Greek yogurt with peanut butter in it and eat it right before I went to bed, I would have thought you were crazy, because that was actually my favorite thing to do. Still, I think about it. But 4 years ago, I started to realize, okay, this nighttime snack situation, we got to get rid of it, because I wasn't even really thinking about fasting necessarily. I just knew that I needed to, I call it dinner and done. I needed to eat my dinner and then the kitchen turns off. I could understand that that was going to help me sleep better. I was going to wake up more energetic. And I was starting to understand that our body needed that rest. It needed those hours to digest the food. And then we finally go to sleep. It's going to be able to do other things. That was the hardest habit for me to break. Losing 80 pounds was peanuts compared to this snack situation. Like I almost had to tie up my hands not to do it. It had become such a habitual, comforting habit. And it was tough for me. But once I got over like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, how different I felt. Like literally my skin was better. I had so much more energy. My brain was clearer. Like the difference was significant. So if you're snacking at night, even just taking that away, you are going to notice such a huge change.
Yeah. And I tell my students, clients, whatever we want to call them, I tell them that all the time. Like these are simple concepts, but that doesn't mean, I'm not saying they're easy to do. They're just simple concepts. And don't snack, don't eat before bed. Like if you can do that, but it can be really, really tough. And I mean, I've gone through periods in my life. I haven't eaten before bed now in long, long time. And I don't think about it. It's just not habitual anymore, but it was. And for me, it was ice cream or popcorn. Like, am I feeling sweet or am I feeling salty? It's like, I don't eat ice cream very often, not because I feel like I can't, but it doesn't make, like, I just don't feel good when I eat, because I just don't eat much sugar anymore. But if I am going to have ice cream, I usually have it in the afternoon. If that's a possibility, if we're out on vacation or whatever, it's like, well, let's have some ice cream after lunch rather than after dinner, or sometime earlier in the day where we can at least process it and then take a walk afterward. And then I feel a lot better, but I just don't have the cravings, like you said, that I used to. Cause that nighttime snacking is so hard. And it's hard too. I don't know about you. Like, so we have 3 kids, but, and only one is still living in our house. The other 2 are at college, but my boys were super active and always in a sport. And, it's like, even if they ate dinner Like they're
Yeah.
just hungry. And so my husband's kind of he likes nighttime snacks too sometimes. So it's so hard. It was at first. I don't even blink an eye at
No,
it anymore, but it's like they're eating their bowl of ice cream or they're having whatever it is before bed. And it was like, it was really
I
hard
know.
to break that habit.
I
So
think it's criminal that we subscribe to our kids needing a snack at night. I
yes.
just like, oh, it's one of my biggest regrets because my daughter actually, she's pretty good. And I think it's probably because she hears me talking all the time. And I'll say, it's 8. Are you feeling like a snack? Like instead of you better go get your snack, it's like, are you feeling like a snack? Do you need it? So it's not me saying don't have it. Like go nuts if you feel like it, but it gives her this moment of pause to sort of ask herself. And I love it because there are times she's like, yeah, no, actually I don't need it.
Yeah.
And I think that's great because we create this habit in our kids and they don't really, if they're really active, like she's been horseback riding all night and yeah, she's hungry, she needs it. But lots of times if you've just been sitting on the couch on your phone playing Roblox, you do not need a snack, right? So I think it's just getting into this awareness. I mean, we talk about this as women all the time. If you're thinking about stress levels and thinking about your food, like be aware of how you're feeling. Be aware, is this just a habit? Am I just opening up the pantry at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because I'm scared, happy, upset, bored? Like taking that was something I started doing on my journey when I started kind of leaning into, I think I'm an emotional eater. I think I'm finding myself with a bowl of chips because an emotion has taken over. So I had to teach myself to pause before, like if I found myself in the kitchen, not at mealtime, I truthfully still try to pause and ask myself why I'm there. Because for me, any emotion, happy, excited, nervous, sad, any emotion, food can sometimes be the answer for me. Unless I'm stopping and asking myself, hey, what's going on here? It's 3, the lights are off. What are you doing here? Because the truth is we don't need to be snacking. If you're eating proper meals, proper balanced meals, not restricting, eating enough, you should not be hungry for 4 or 5 hours, truthfully.
For sure. Yeah. The awareness is always the first critical step. Like if you don't know what you're doing is habitual, it's hard to fix it. But
Yeah.
once you're aware, that makes it so much easier. But yeah, same thing. Like they're teenage boys. It's like, and they're so active. So yes, if they're hungry, it's one thing. But I remember my middle son, who just left for college this fall, he was talking about how, some of his friends were worried about gaining the freshman 15. And honest to God, my boys are like tall and thin and they're built like my husband. My husband was 6'2" and 150 pounds when he left for college. And my son's about the same. And my husband is one of those people who could basically get away with anything until he was in his 40s. And even now, it's not like he had this huge weight gain, but it's like, he's got to like rethink some of his habits. But I'm like, okay, if you're worried about that, it's alcohol and it's night eating. Like those two things combined are elevating your inflammation and you just aren't meant. And then it's like in college, those go hand in hand, right? You go drinking and then you come home and you order pizza. And it's like, well, no wonder that compiled with all the food that you're eating in the cafeteria. It's like no holds bars. You wonder why. And they're just under stress too. It's like they're away from home for the first time. So all of those things compiled together. Yeah, just set them up. So you talked about like the night eating. I wanted to ask you like what your thoughts were on like maintaining that 80-pound weight loss. What's been the hardest thing about that? And maybe it's how you mentioned the snacking in the night snacking. Was there anything else you would add to that that's been a challenge that you've overcome where it would have been really easy to backslide?
Yeah. Well, I can say a couple years ago, perimenopause, I feel like hit me. All of a sudden I noticed, a little lower belly situation. Like I remember the day looking in the mirror and thinking, what? So it wasn't a lot, but it was enough for me to be like, oh, this is interesting. And maintaining my weight felt a little bit harder. Even though I hadn't changed much, I felt a little more anxious. Overall, I felt a little bit different. And it truthfully felt like it was a light switch. It was like one day I was like this, and then the next day I was like this. So that's when just personally I started leaning into, okay, great. Like, here we are. I'm not going to be mad about it, but I'm not going to be okay with it. I am not using this as an excuse. And I already have a lot of healthy habits established. I knew that I probably just needed to make a few little tweaks. So the tweaks that I made are not going to make you guys happy, because they still don't make me that happy. But it's the way it is. I just am like, I want to be healthy. I want to feel good, and I don't want to have belly fat. Like, I just don't. So, I let go of alcohol. I mean, I am not a sober sister, anything like that. Like, I will still have a glass of wine. I'll still have a sangria out with friends, like socially every once in a while. Maybe I have a drink once a week or once a month. Not even like, but I used to. Red wine was like my niche, like red wine. I was like, right. I did that a lot. So that's something that I really had to really get rid of. And honestly, I feel so much like once you wake up one weekend and you haven't had a glass of wine, you will know what I'm talking about. Like, it's another habit. It was kind of like that snack at night. I remember many, many weekends sort of saying to myself, I'm not going to drink alcohol this weekend. And I wouldn't, because I do have a lot of determination. No one loses 80 pounds without being determined. But I still felt like the pull, like that habit of sitting on the couch. So I went through phases of doing non-alcoholic wine and club soda. Like, I did a lot of things to sort of trick my brain. What finally helped me is I got some migraines along with this perimenopause, and alcohol was a big trigger, the histamine. So that was the last straw for me. I was like, well, that is not worth it. Like, I am not having another migraine because of a glass of wine. That's ridiculous. So that's something that I gave up. I really had to increase protein. So I'm very, very, I mean, you talk about this all the time as well, like 50, 60 grams each meal. I'm prioritizing protein a lot. And I just had to get rid of the carbs. I know my body. I did use a blood glucose monitor for quite a while, probably about a year. And now I use a lumen. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but I use a lumen. So every morning I am checking my levels, and it is very clear that even sweet potatoes are not great for me. I love them, and it's not that I won't allow them. I'm never doing any of that kind of restriction, but 90% of the time, I'm just choosing more vegetables instead, more broccoli, more asparagus, whatever. Because it just works better for my body. I have to eat fruit earlier in the day. Like, I've just had to make these little tweaks. And truthfully, it's because I want to have optimal energy. And I understand that this transition through your 40s, it might happen earlier for some people, later for others. I want to set myself up to be in the perfect position for menopause. As I said, through this whole kind of theme, I'm all about like longevity, looking better than I ever have, being stronger than I ever have, not going to the doctors, feeling gross. Like, I just want to be as healthy as I can be. So those are tweaks that I have had to make over the last couple of years. So French fries, pizza, processed foods, like I don't do them. I don't crave them. If you're craving stuff like that, you probably are deficient in something. Like, honestly, don't blame yourself. The truth is, if you're craving chocolate all the time, you're probably deficient in magnesium. If you're craving, like, there's a direct correlation between something that's missing in your body and a craving. So stop blaming ourselves, but figure those things out, and then you can add them back in. And I remember the cravings leaving. I remember years ago feeling like I always craved salty, always and true cravings. It wasn't like a emotional craving. And then paying attention for like 30, 60 days to my nutrition, making sure that I was getting those nutrients and vitamins. I don't crave anything now. Nothing. I might have ice cream because I want ice cream. I've made that choice, but I'm not craving it. So just paying attention to the cues that your body is giving you if you're in that transition of perimenopause or whatever we're calling it right now, whatever happens in your 40s, it's not, you can keep feeling good, and you don't have to gain an extra 10 pounds, and you don't have to have anxiety, like all those things that are symptoms, those classic symptoms that we're reading about. We don't have to be okay with those. We can make simple changes and tweaks and feel great, feel just as good as we did in our 30s. And I think better
For
in our
sure.
50s.
I feel better in my 40s than I did in my 20s even.
Totally.
Well, I appreciate your honesty because my relationship with alcohol and carbohydrates has changed a lot over the last 5 years as well. And yeah, alcohol is one of those things. I mean, the only time I really ever abused it was in college in maybe my early 20s. But I just got to the point, same as you, I didn't get migraines, but I just didn't sleep well. I could see it on my aura ring. And I thought, what? And I never wanted to drink more than a drink or two. So I'm like, what is the point of this? This year I did dry January just because more so, I mean, it wasn't like, oh, can I make it through It was more like gave me excuse to tell other people why I wasn't drinking. Like, nope, I'm doing dry January. And then I just kept going with it. And the only drinks I've had in 2023 was when my son was still a senior in high school. We did like a mom-son trip. I think I had 5 drinks that whole week. And then I came home. I'm like, okay, that's it.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think about it. I don't care. I've had other family members now go alcohol free, which is huge. And I'm so excited. Like, I feel like going alcohol free is kind of like going nicotine free now for people, because it's just not, I don't know. It does nothing for me. And I was never one of, I mean, there's true addiction for sure. I was never one of those people. And I just like, I don't like, why would I have 1 or 2 drinks when I don't want them? And so, but yeah, I feel like it's got to evolve. And, not like you and I are saying like, everybody has to do this in order to be healthy, but you make your choice and then you deal with the consequences. And I think like, it's that black and white. It's like, well, if I have 2 drinks, I'm probably going to sleep like crap. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to take me days to kind of get back to where I was, where now I just don't even like entertain the idea of drinking anymore. But I'm kind of the same. Like, I don't want to say I'm never, ever going to drink again. Like, now it's been 7 months and I'm like, I don't have any inkling, but at the same time, I don't want to, decide in my head and then be disappointed. But I do know it's like, if I drink, then I deal with the consequences. And same with carbs. It's like when we're in our late 40s, we do not process carbohydrates like we did in our 20s and 30s. And so we have to come to terms with that. And you said like, oh, the 2 things, like, they're not going to be fun to hear. It's like, no, we don't want to hear we can't drink and we can't eat carbs like we used to, but it's just the truth of the matter. And so if you want to feel your best and live your life in a way in optimal health, like, that's what's going to get you there. And I know some people just don't agree with low carb, or they don't. And I'm not saying everybody's got to, be at a certain threshold, but for many of us, as we go through perimenopause and menopause, we are just not as insulin sensitive. And I think, a lot of us aren't doing the strength training to counteract any muscle mass loss, and that's backfiring. And we just can't eat the carbohydrates that we used to. So yeah, I appreciate your honesty with that. But, just a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. I did want to say, like, I love my hairdresser, like going back to your former life. Like, I love hairdresser. She's a riot. Like, I love going there. And she's been doing my hair for decades, like ever since I've lived in this area. And she's my same age, and we have so much fun talking. But when I go, like, I just don't really put chemicals on my hair. Just because they don't do it, like, I have straight fine hair. And so when I'm in there and she's just spraying the sprays and I'm just like, whoa, and she's got her own little, like, her own private room. So you're just kind of in. But I'm like, oh my goodness, I am getting gassed out. I don't even want to breathe in these fumes. Of course, I don't say anything because she probably thinks I'm crazy as it is with all of my health nut stuff that I do. But do you think in any way like that, like just the breathing of the chemicals, like seeing all the processing, like that was come into play for you?
Oh, now, I mean, education is so cool because I mean, now when I think about all the things that I have put on my skin, put on other people, I lived and breathed it 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for 25 years. I mean, now when I understand like endocrine disruptors and our hormones and like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was just like such a hot mess. Like everything I was doing was affecting me, which the direct consequence was my weight. Like what you could see on the outside was this puffy, inflamed woman who was trying everything. I was always on a diet. I would like, it was not that I was eating terrible, you know, like from the knowledge I had, but I think I had so many, just so much was off. My hormones were so off. There were so many of these other circumstances, like skincare products I was using that were terrible. I was like spraying hairspray every half hour, and same, mine was a little enclosed cubby too. So yes, do I think there's a correlation? 100%. And gosh, back then I had a Veda, which is a pretty natural product, but honestly, I've checked them out since. They're not as natural. They don't meet my criteria anymore. My criteria is very high now. Like I am one of those crazy people that like investigate everything very thoroughly, but my daughter hates me for it, of course, because she's 12 and she's just getting into skincare and makeup. And I'm like, nope, you're not using that. You're not using that. But she'll thank me one day. So yeah, to your question, I do think it will be affecting.
Yeah. And you just wonder like how far into your tissues is it? And hopefully, you know, you've had enough time to detoxify a lot of that. But I have a lot of family members who use Aveda as well. And my hairdresser is all Paul Mitchell. And I used to use all Paul Mitchell products. And now I'm like, no, I just don't put, like I use Labri shampoo and conditioner, which is a sponsor of the podcast. I love them. They're out of Wisconsin. But I don't really put anything else on my hair. And yes, I've totally switched over everything. I mean, I used to remember this was back in college, like smearing the cucumber melon
I know.
from Bath and Body and just all the perfumes. And I don't even know that I like the scent that well. It was just everybody else did it. Now I refuse to go into Bath and Body. Like I can't even walk past there. Like I hold my breath when I walk past there.
My daughter's the same. I've trained her, and so she'll go to someone's house and she's a little bit forward. She'll say, well, you shouldn't use this. But you know, something that someone said to me once, and this made complete sense to me. I've actually never used any HRT or progesterone creams or anything like that, but how she worded this made sense. She was really struggling with hormone imbalances, migraines, like all the symptoms. So she was put on progesterone cream. So like an all natural, whatever. Within a couple days of using this cream, she felt so much different. Like her symptoms really subsided. Like it was really significant. So what she said to me was, if that cream that I just put the tiniest little bit on my wrist can make me feel so good, what is Bath and Body Works doing to our skin? Like, if it can absorb and make me feel that much better, what is this stuff or the lotion that we're using? I mean, that was really the first time that I was like, whoa, like that's wild. You're right. Like if this can make such a difference for you, what is this doing to us? So it's, if someone's kind of like, oh, come on, like creams can't be that bad. Cause I used to think that, honestly, I'm not judging, because I used to think that like, it can't be that bad. But when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so true. Like our skin is our biggest organ, and it is like absorbing everything. So
yeah. And my daughter's past that. She's 20, but my boys, they're 18 and 15. And they're the ones who are like, can you just get us something that smells manly? Can you get me a deodorant that normal people wear? So when I'm in the locker room and I take out my deodorant, like it looks normal. So I'm so happy. And I think it's native, probably isn't the best option, but it's better. And at least it's aluminum free, but we kind of have settled on that. It's like, it's not what I would have you use. Like I order from these ladies in Minnesota who make their own deodorant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the makeup that I use too. But yeah, you just got to do baby steps. And I mean, we've talked about chemical exposure on the podcast before, but it all adds up, and it's just little things over time. Like there's never just one set thing in almost any circumstance that's gonna like completely change your life. It's just all the little things added up. So before we close out, I do wonder too, you struggled with PCOS. There's a lot of listeners who struggle with that. And I know you kind of have your own success story around that, but is there anything that like PCOS specific that you did to heal your body, or was it just a culmination of all of the things that helped you heal that disease?
Yeah, I'm so embarrassed to say that I'm actually PCOS illiterate because of the time that I was in. There wasn't a lot of information. So it was almost like I had it, but it wasn't the driver that made me get healthy. And that might not make any sense to anyone, but because I was just handed this diagnosis, kind of beat up with it, I just was like, okay, that's that. I didn't really understand that there was this relationship between my habits and my health and my PCOS. When I was kind of going through that journey, I hadn't put the pieces together. It wasn't until a few years ago that I dug into hormones that I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like, why didn't you guys tell me this? I was determined enough to change my eating. If you would have told me, I would have XYZ. So it's kind of embarrassing because I don't have a lot of knowledge around PCOS, even though I lived with it for so long. But because I wasn't given any support or anything around it back so many years ago, my ammunition to lose weight and become healthy had nothing to do with PCOS because I didn't actually know there was a relationship between. And I'm just so glad that there's so much out there now, because I mean, I read a statistic a couple of days ago about PCOS, and it's like astounding how many women are dealing with this. And I'm just so glad that there's so much information and help out there for them, because there just wasn't when I was going through it.
Yeah. And that's encouraging to hear that you were focused on wellness. You weren't like, I have PCOS, I need to do these exact things for PCOS. Like you were focused on getting your body well and weight loss, of course, but those are all the things you focus on, all the things that probably reverse the insulin resistance that was driving the PCOS. But yeah, those hormones, they need to be in just the right amounts. And it is amazing to think like any of us can get pregnant when you sit and think about what those hormone fluctuations are doing, what needs to happen for the hormones to be in balance. It's
wild that so many people reproduce actually, because it's like insane. It has to be like,
I know when you read about conception and the little period where it can actually happen, it's like, well,
I know, it's crazy.
How do we have billions of people in the world?
I know, it is crazy.
Oh, and as we close out, are there any other tips? We have a lot of families, we have a lot of moms. We talked a little bit about this, and it's like, it's such a hard balance with kids, and it's, mine are older and you teach them what you can teach, but it's so hard to not be crazy mom. And I know like in my kids' schools, even and my kids' friends, like, I don't think they classify me as crazy mom, but they classify me as health mom, nutrition mom. Like I'll do team meal, for example, like my son who's in volleyball right now, I'll be in charge of team meal, and I'm bringing in chicken and I'm bringing in fruit. They're assuming the chicken is soy, like vegetarian. I'm like, so they equate health nut with soybean. Like, I'm like, you guys, I would never eat that. Like, I don't eat tofu. I eat real food. And so it's like, it's so funny because they're kind of laughing. And then other moms will say, yeah, my son said, well, Sam's my son. And he's like, well, Sam has it, so it must be healthy. Like, I
Yeah.
think it's a drink that I'm not real comfortable with him drinking, but it's better than a lot of the alternatives. So I'm like, well, not really. Like, so they just like think, okay, if Sam's eating it or drinking it, it's okay. But do you have any tips? I mean, your daughter's 12, so you're just kind of getting into that period of time where like like middle school, high school are hard years because the peer pressure is on. It's like when they're younger and you send their lunch to school with them, it's not like kids aren't that critical. But oh my gosh, all three of my kids have been, there's a lens on their lunch every single day.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you find that balance as a mom? And there's no right or wrong here. I'm just asking, for your little tidbits on any, specific things that you do at your house.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I remember when I was in elementary school, one of my friends had like the healthy mom, and we never wanted to go to their house because we'd have to eat seeds. And like, I remember thinking that, and now I am that mom. Like now I am her. Tips. I mean, there's snacks in our house. There's chips in our house. Like I am not going to be the crazy mom, but here's what I do. Delaney, starting to get a few spots, so acne. And I just make her aware that that's because of food choices. So for me, I think what's been the biggest help is learning, like actually reading the information, and I'd have an aha moment, hearing the information on a podcast, and I'll be like, oh, okay. And when I was hearing the information, it enabled me to make the change. I was more ready to make the change because I had the information versus someone just telling me you're not allowed to have chocolate or you're not allowed to have French fries. But then when I understood why, I was able to make the change. So that's kind of how I've gone about it with my daughter. I just am here to give you the information, and here's the choices. There's certainly not a lot of snacks in our house, and they're the healthier, like Ciet chips, not Lay's. Like, I mean, it's the healthier stuff. But I also I'm a big like, well, you could have that, but you're probably not going to feel great tomorrow. Or you could have this. Like we have all the ingredients to make some oats, and you could put some dark chocolate chips in it and you'll feel better. Like, so it's kind of giving the choices, giving the information, if this is bothering you, this is why, and you have complete control over changing that. And so that's kind of how I've gone about it. I also give no shits. Like when her friends are over here, I can remember not too long ago, I was making seed crackers, and her friend was like, what are you making? Like, these are going to be gross. And I was like, why don't you just make them with me? You guys come here. I'll show you how to make them. And you don't have to like them, but I am showing you that you can make your own crackers out of seeds. Like you actually don't have to buy Ritz if you don't want to. Someday you might remember this. And it's always funny because her friends usually say they like it. And Delaney's like, this is so gross. Like, why do you make these? So I'm just like myself about it. I'm not embarrassed. I know that someday they'll thank me. That's what I always say to Delaney is, someday you're going to thank me because you're going to know this. And she does come home and say, Mom, guess what was in so-and-so's lunch? Like all they had was like fruit roll-ups and granola bars and chips. Like that's all they ate. And then I'm like, oh gosh. And how were they for the rest of the day? And she's like really cranky and hyper. So it's like making her realize that's why. Like she wasn't just cranky and hyper just because, it was because of what she ate. So just kind of dropping these nuggets that hopefully eventually will come back, and healthy won't be hard. Healthy was hard for me. It was like this huge journey of like ups and downs. And I don't want it to be hard for our kids. I just want it to just be what they know.
She will thank you someday. It takes a while, and they usually have to be out of your household before they realize. But my daughter 100% realizes, and she realized her freshman year of college, and she now eats almost all whole food because she knows how she feels if she, and that's how they learn. It's like, I feel like this when I eat this, and I feel like this if I eat the alternative. And my son's figuring it out. And yeah, about 6 weeks
Good.
into college, he's like, okay, you said I was gonna miss your food someday, and I get it.
It's happened.
It's finally happened. So yeah, you just got to teach them the basics and not go completely overboard. And just, I think we do the exact same thing. It's like, this is how you feel if you
Yeah.
do this, or this is the outcome when you do this, rather than you can't have this, you can't have that. And then you just provide all of the, the healthiest choices when you can. But it's hard. I mean, it's
It
hard
is.
when they start driving and they have free reign to do
Mhm.
whatever and hit the drive through, and you don't have exact control over what they're doing anymore. So
Exactly. Yeah.
this has been a delightful conversation. I know you work with clients, and you also wrote a book called Handling the Hard
Yeah,
Stuff.
I
So
did.
tell us where people can work with you further if they so choose. And then, like we talked before, you do have a podcast called In Total
Yeah.
Alignment.
Yeah. Well, definitely just come and hang out with me on Instagram. It's Michelle Pfile. That's where I am. That's where I really focus on women's hormones. So I'm just constantly sharing like hormone hacks and fun hormone balancing recipes, stuff that you can just take away and implement immediately. Just fun little things. So come there, send me a message. Let's chat. I work with clients one-on-one. I am a nutritional therapist. So I do a lot of that one-on-one, and I have some group coaching, and definitely my podcast. I mean, my podcast is more about me talking to women like you. So just so many great people that I've met, so many great women that are just all about empowering, right? Having that empowering lifestyle. And so make sure you tune into that as well.
Excellent. We'll link all of that in the show notes. I'll put a link for the Lumen in the show
Oh
notes.
yeah.
We talked a
Yeah.
little bit about that. That can be a useful tool depending on where you are at on your journey, but I do have a discount code for that. But we appreciate you sharing your story. It was really fun to chat with you and hear about all your success, and know that it's just a holistic approach that needs to happen in order for you to reach your optimal health. So thanks so much for coming on.
I appreciate you. Thank you.